Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Wholeness Campaign podcast. We are your hosts, Eric and Selena. We never introduce ourselves, so I thought I'd do that. We want to talk with you today about just the dynamic in marriage when it comes to healing. So, if you backtrack our story, it really began before we met. Each of us have been on a healing journey, maybe not physical, up until recently, but it really has been this emotional healing journey, um, really for a long time now. We've been processing trauma, experiences in childhood, trying to reconcile things that we thought were one way, but then coming to faith, have learned that things are another way. And so our healing processes have been kind of unique. Really been a body, soul, and spirit healing process. Like when it comes to deliverance, inner healing, trauma counseling, and nutrition as medicine, and all this alternative medicine that we've done for physical health as well. So we really are passionate about addressing our health from every angle possible because we've seen that them all play a factor. You can't just do trauma healing without addressing gut health, but you also can't just address gut health. You have to address, your nervous system and your spiritual health and your it's just funny. We always kind of like joke around that, is this spiritual, is this physical, or is this like emotional? That's kind of our question whenever we're dealing with conflict in marriage, or if we're dealing with um, you know, difficulties that might come up.
Yeah.
But really, the dynamic between us as a married couple in all of that has been quite dynamic. Um, we we really have, I mean, when it comes to food as medicine and physical healing, we took a really big deep dive about a month into marriage. And that was wild. We started an introduction diet to GAPS 1 month into marriage, um, and really have encountered a lot. So we want to kind of take you through that story. We want to take you through some of the things that we've like experienced and the common struggles that we hear from married couples when it comes to healing processes, and maybe some tips and encouragement if you're in the throes of trying to help somebody heal, if you're working with your spouse on any kind of like emotional health stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, um I think we'll just start. I think a good place to start would be really back when we were dating, because I had some pretty intense concussion recovery uh, when we were dating. I remember when it was coming back from seeing my family. I had gotten a really intense concussion. I actually ended up needing to drop out of that semester, but we had some. I mean, the symptoms got so bad that you ended up taking me to the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember you saying that it was this really like powerless feeling, like you felt like you you really struggled mentally because you were like put in this very vulnerable situation. You cared about me so much. You didn't really know any of what was going on or how to handle it. And it was pretty severe. It was pretty severe. They put me on some really intense drugs that were really unhelpful. And I was getting all these scans. I remember I was telling you that I didn't want them, but I didn't know how to have a voice for myself at the time. And we're just dating. You're really just like my ride and encouragement.
Uh,
What was that like for you?
I don't know. I just think that was the real beginning of all this.
Mm-hmm.
So even thinking back to that, I was just starting to walk out healing in every area. I
Yeah,
was pretty new to being a Christian, so I was
yeah,
pretty new to like developing a spiritual life. I was pretty new to counseling and like emotional health. And if I'm being honest, like at that point, I might have thought that I was healthy physically because I worked out a lot still, and I thought I ate well. But compared to like what I know now, I really didn't know much of
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
about nutrition. So I don't know. I think I just felt definitely very powerless and overwhelmed and like what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Kind of like in some ways like well maybe that came later. I think what came later was like what am I getting myself into type of
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
Like yeah, I think because then as we started to deepen our relationship and then talking about marriage and stuff like that, if you're about to enter into marriage or a serious relationship with someone who has a chronic illness or is suffering physically,
Right. And at that point, it had been like
y-
2 years. Most of our
yeah,
relationship was me struggling with concussion symptoms.
yeah, that can feel very overwhelming. I'm sure I know there's people out there that they're married to someone that has a chronic illness or it's been part of their season, part of their time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where and walking along and that can add a lot of complications and hard parts to a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like in our marriage, it's kind of it was really just a season because you've come out of a lot of that.
Right.
But back then I
Right.
didn't know if it was just going to be a season and I didn't
Yeah.
know how long that season was going to last. And when you're in it, it can feel like you're scared like is this forever? Like will Selena
Right.
ever go back to because
The
I knew
way you met me.
yeah, I
Right.
knew what you were like prior to that
Right.
and then all of a sudden you slipped into yeah this your health took this turn and you
Right.
became so different because your body was really struggling, right?
Right.
And then just wondering,
Because it's like depressive. Like the concussion symptoms I was dealing with weren't just like physical. They ended up, I mean, I was being instructed for months on end to stay in a dark room.
mm,
It was very depressing. And
yeah,
my attitude towards life like really changed a lot in
yeah,
that time. I even remember like one of our pre-marriage counselors saying that um, they personally had the experience of getting married, and then several years into marriage was when she developed um, a chronic illness, like an autoimmune condition that was really debilitating. And so the kind of interaction was like, you Eric, like, you know what you're choosing into.
yeah,
Like there actually is a cost to walking with somebody in sickness and in health.
yes,
And
yeah,
there's but you were aware of that cost. He wasn't as aware of the cost. And I think there actually is a lot of like divorce, separation that happens in that space because people really aren't ready to like, you know, apply that vow of in sickness and in health.
yeah,
They don't really know what that means. They might think, oh, when somebody's sick for a few days, but what happens when somebody's sick for
years,
years? And it's like debilitating, and they can't make you dinner, and they like, especially as a wife, like what does it look like when, yeah, they can't operate in the role that you pictured them being in your whole life, or pictured having as this like housewife, or there's all
yeah,
sorts of dynamics in the relationship that we were talking with. But
hmm
yeah, it's
no, it's hard.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think we all kind of have an idea of what we want our marriage to look like or our life to look like or certain moments.
Hmm.
So we have these certain expectations,
Yeah.
but so often things turn out different
Right.
and sometimes in very good ways, other times in very hard ways. So it is part of like what do you do when things don't turn out the way that you thought or
Right.
they're just different because sometimes it's blessings in disguise like sometimes those hardest moments end up being like the biggest blessings,
Right.
and we kind of just write them off, or we, yeah, or we just kind of quit or give up when it gets really tough.
Right.
And I think,
Even emotionally, it doesn't even,
yeah,
you might be in the marriage still, but
yeah,
like,
yeah,
are you connected to what's going on? Are
yeah,
you emotionally available still? Are
yeah,
you, is your heart engaged? Because I think a lot of people, especially, I think it's very common male experience to just kind of like slip into passivity and
hmm,
like, um, yeah, like it's so like the
yeah,
emotions around it are so hard to deal with. The
yeah,
disappointment, the hope deferred, the feelings of like hopelessness are so like really you have to like confront those, but it can be so extremely painful and bring up so much trauma that it can keep anybody in the relationship kind of stuck in this like trauma state. So in addition to having this like physical layer, you have a relationship that's like kind of functioning in this traumatized state.
hmm,
There's like a word for it, where people who go through really traumatic things together, they become trauma bonded.
yeah,
And so sometimes it's actually hard to find out what your actual dynamic is in marriage because you are so used to relating to each other out of this like fight, flight, freeze response. Um, yeah, it's
yeah. No, what I'm thinking about is, I think for a lot of people, it's also hard to stay wholehearted
yeah,
in marriage, because I think everyone starts off wholehearted. Like they enter in and they're just like, what I mean by wholehearted is they're just kind of, they're willing to give their full selves
right.
to the marriage, or they're just optimistic, right?
They're
And they're,
showing up
yeah,
emotionally,
hmm,
they're compassionate towards themselves and towards the other person.
yeah,
They have emotional capacity to carry the other person's burden sometimes.
yeah, yeah, or just, I think that is just one of the hardest things to do, but one of the most important,
Yeah.
because it's gonna be messy. Like,
Yeah.
marriage is messy and healing is messy. And I mean, the reason why this is wholeness campaign is we believe in wholeness, and wholeness is body, soul, and spirit. So it's healing. It's that healing journey in every
Right.
area of your life, and that's a messy process. And I've even heard people say before that the person that you marry, it's like, what was the quote? Like, they become different people throughout your
Right.
marriage.
Right.
So the person you marry originally, they're going to become someone different 5 years down the line, 10, 20, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they're changing, they're evolving. And I think that is something that we don't maybe fully realize, is we think the person we marry, we just think they're going to stay the same,
Mhm.
or we want them to stay the same. But that's not true for either person. The person wishing that on the other person, that's not even true for them. They're becoming someone different. They're healing, whether it's they're healing and becoming healthier, or they're letting the pain make them more bitter or something like
Yeah,
that. Like,
absolutely.
it's really, what do we do with life circumstances around us, and like what's happening,
Right.
and those invitations. Um, like, I've heard people say, the number one way that God really shows up to like disciple and teach people is just within life itself.
Right.
Like, it's not always this mystical experience. It's within life circumstances, things that are happening,
Yeah.
good, bad, whatever. Um, it's those invitations
Yeah.
where life is kind of, God is showing up as life, and that is the invitation of forming you
Yeah.
into who you're becoming.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we're all being formed by something or someone. Um, yeah, and I just think staying wholehearted in marriage is so important. Being willing. I know I've said that to you before. Like that's probably like the number one thing I think is the most important thing
Yeah.
is not are you the perfect. I think communication's important. I think conflict resolution's important. All those different things, validation, compassion.
Yeah.
Like I think it's important to get good at those things, learn those things. But at the root of all of that is having a heart that's willing to grow,
Yeah.
that just is willing to get back up, go to the drawing
Keep
board,
fighting for, yeah.
fighting. Yeah, that just kind of what you're saying. Like you can be in the marriage, but you can just kind of, that's like quiet quitting.
It's
With a
quiet
job,
quitting.
you can kind of quiet quit at
Yeah.
your marriage
Right.
and you're still there and showing up, but you're just a shell of yourself and you're not really fighting for the marriage anymore. So the most vulnerable place to be is to keep showing up and keep fighting for your marriage, even
Mhm.
though it's messy.
Dragging your butt to the table in
Yeah,
a sense. Like you're not like you're not s- you're not on the sidelines. You're like,
yeah,
I'm going to show up here.
hmm,
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean like in every single physical aspect, because I think there's an element of like all of us need like a community of people around us. It can't just be the spouse. But I think in the more intimate relationships, it can be the more vulnerable ones, and those are the relationships that are most affected by life circumstances.
hmm,
Um, yeah, I think it's interesting when you don't have a choice, like the whole idea of like whether you have a choice of like you knew ahead of time or you didn't know ahead of time. It really does, it boils down to what you just said of, were you willing to grow in the first place? Like, were you willing to like
yeah,
let this experience of marriage affect you, let the other person's experience affect you, even if that means that there's a grief process in it? Because I know for us, like, we you have had to grieve like your expectations. I remember we were married for a month and I was like, all right, I'm sick and tired of being sick and I need a like radical change. And so I think we like stopped restaurants like one like full on intro gaps 1 month into marriage. We
yeah,
just got married. We're figuring out marriage life, and this is like the time I'm like, all right, we're overhauling our entire diet. And and now I want a new water filter and I need this. And my mind just like went into like okay, how can I heal mode?
yeah.
And I remember you saying like a couple months into that, you're like, you were not into any of this. Just like 5 months ago, like I said I do to somebody who was totally different than what you've become,
Oh yeah,
which like isn't a bad thing. But at the time, I think it was a really big, it was such a big like transition for you because you really enjoyed restaurants. Our dating life was like restaurants, being around friends, community in college, like around college campuses.
yeah,
Like our friendship networks were very like embedded in a culture that I was basically kind of like pulling us out of and trying to kind of create something new. And it was challenging for you. I think I remember you saying you had to like actually grieve that we weren't gonna like, we went to a restaurant like the last time we went, and you had to like grieve that this was like, it's gonna be like, this is gonna be over for a while.
oh yeah,
Like we're not gonna be back here for a while.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It might sound silly, but yeah,
no, it's not. It's actually not silly at all. Um, it kind of is like a death to self process. Not, yeah, I always say this, not in a self deprecating way, but really not in a self deprecating way. It's you like you have to become somebody new in this marriage. Like it's calling you to become someone new,
hmm,
and to like grow into a new person,
Yeah.
you saying yes to that is really meaning that this old self is like on the altar. It's like in the you're sacrificing the old self to transform into what is like the most beneficial for your relationship, the most beneficial for my health. It's a lot of it really is was like a huge sacrifice.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Um
Yeah. I mean, that's what you're gonna say something.
no, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's marriage is. It is sacrifice. It
Right.
is learning to do life with someone else. You're joined to someone else. You're making decisions with someone else.
Their ailments affect you.
Mm-hmm.
Their victories affect you,
Yeah.
but yeah, their ailments affect you.
Yeah.
You can only go as fast as like the quote like you can only go as far as your slowest
Mm-hmm.
player or like your you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, so I mean, all that kind of changing at once at the very beginning of our marriage was definitely overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
Just because it was a lot to change at once. And to be honest with you, I mean, we've talked about this, like, we don't know if that was the smartest
I
way.
definitely wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, it might not have been the smartest way to do it in the beginning, but that's what we did.
Hmm.
And it had a lot of challenge. But that's part of it. It's messy, right? So whatever you're trying to do, you're probably not going to do it the best way all the time.
Right.
So I think for you, you were just so desperate. You were like, I need to be all in.
Right.
And I wasn't there yet. But you being in such a vulnerable place, I think you wanted me to be there
Right.
because you needed that support. So I was kind of stuck
Hmm.
in this middle ground
I
of
really
like,
asked you to do it with me for me.
yeah. And that's totally valid that you needed. It's a lot to do. It was a lot to change. There's a lot to be supported if as far as cooking and research and buying the right foods and preparation and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so you needing support is totally valid, but I think I definitely really struggled with trying to support you as much as I could, but also feeling like I don't even know if I really want to be doing this.
Yeah.
I didn't
I feel
sign
like it's
up.
a common
Yeah,
husband.
yeah. So I think it's tempting to shut down in that place, and I don't think I did. You could tell me if I did. Maybe I did at times,
No, you had
but I
moments,
think
but
I
you were
also, yeah.
you chosen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's times where I would shut down, or there's times where I would get upset, like, or like, try to fight my way, like not physically fight, but just like tr
Resist
yeah, like resist like
the
that
change.
way of changing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just by vocalizing like I don't know if I want to do this and this is stupid and stuff
Yeah.
like that and it was hard. So it's taken me a while. I've had to go on my own healing journey. It's been 4 years of I don't want to say the word finally, but just
Yeah.
getting to a place where just now I feel like I am starting to own this way more. And I
Hmm.
still wouldn't say I'm like 100% there,
Yeah.
but it took me a while to get to a place of no, I need to be because I think for a while it was like Selena needs to be on this, but I don't.
Right.
So it was like you were kind of owning your own healing journey with food. We're talking specifically with nutrition right now.
Yeah.
You need to be on your own, because you're healing from this and you're healing from that. But I don't really need, I think that was my viewpoint for a while. I was
Hmm.
like, I don't really need to be on it. But I think I am getting to that place of like facing the reality of like, it's a hard reality to face. We're like, I think I need to be on this too. I wish that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
That's normal to wish. I wish this wasn't the case.
Right.
But at some point, you need to face the reality of where you're actually at, the situation you're actually in, and that's when you can make real effective changes. And
Right.
I think a lot of people are just in denial.
Yeah.
They don't
They're
real
hung up in grief.
Yeah, or they don't realize the state that they're in.
Yeah.
Or they just don't think it's that urgent.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not to you, but
Especially in relationship with people that are, especially in a marriage relationship where there's an invitation to grow here
yeah, it does
and
depend
it
on the
affects other
standard of the
people.
marriage too.
Yeah.
So different depending on the standard of the people, like what the standard that the people hold. Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is the level of health we want to access
Right.
physically, mentally,
Right.
emotionally. That's going to require something.
Right. There's a cost.
Yeah. So, when you're in a marriage with somebody and they have high standards in different areas, or you're kind of setting that standard together. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
that other person can call you to a higher standard. And I think in some
Right.
ways you've done that for me. Like you've called me to a higher standard in physical health.
Yeah.
And that's been challenging. That hasn't come easy.
Yeah. And it's honestly like this has been a topic we talk about with our marriage counselor because we want to come about it in a healthy way. We want both people feeling powerful. So when I say powerful, I mean like feeling like they have a choice in it, feeling like they're capable, feeling like they are in a healthy place of self control in it, and not like something is happening to me or like I'm a victim to the other person doing this, but feeling like they have chosen it and really like backing their decisions. So
Yeah.
like when we say like powerful, that's kind of what we mean. But it takes a lot to get to that place of being feeling like you're making a powerful decision. And you have to, if you're in a marriage, like you have to make around your health decisions, especially, it can be devastating. I've heard stories of like where somebody's like choosing to do one thing for their health, even if it's like a way of dealing with one thing, and the spouse is not on board. Um, Not having that support is one thing, but the spouse might not be adamantly against it, but it's the fact that the spouse isn't powerfully choosing something is
Hmm.
it can be very painful for the other person. And I remember we had this conversation for a while, like especially like pre pregnancy, where I was like, I'm working on my health because I'm trying to make like generational change. Like I kind of came to you and I was like, are you on board? Like we don't live in times of like happy go lucky, like you can just float on by and be okay anymore. Like this is not the time we're living in. The time we live in is like you be intentional and put your money where your mouth is, and like there's kind of a little bit of a war out there on our bodies.
Yeah.
And not to be like so intense, but there's a reality that intentionality is so key. And the people like people when people aren't intentional, they reap the consequences of it.
Hmm.
Sometimes, not all the times, but I think more and more people are reaping the consequences of just not being aware and not being intentional. And I remember coming to you and I was like, this is serious. Like my heart is really hurting because I'm working so hard to like heal my body, detox my body, because I want my babies to be as healthy as possible. And it really would break my heart if like you chose to just like not be on board with that goal, that same goal. And not everybody has to have that like I'm not like I wasn't necessarily giving you an ultimatum. Not everybody needs to like be at that level of intensity, but for me, I was like I went through I went through like a lot of childhood sickness, and I'm like I need, even if I mean like, I'm not just saying you being on like a diet, but I'm like I need your mental like agree I need your agreement with me on how we're going to do this and the intentionality with it, because like I want a good future for our children, and this is what I see that being. And um that was an ongoing conversation for a while, like preconception, because I was preparing my body to be pregnant, and from like years and years of antibiotic use and um, toxic overload and things like that. And it took a while for you to feel like you could make that decision powerfully, and
Mm.
that you understood why I was doing that, or you believed in what we were doing. Like, you kind of had to go on your own journey of that. Nobody can be like doing that for an entire household. There really does have to be an agreement amongst the spouse. Not that you're doing it perfectly, but that you have like the same like vision.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be the highest vision, but that you guys are in agreement with like what are our priorities. Yeah, I don't know. I would love to hear your like process on that, because I think it's something we still talk about, but there was a period where I was like, this is really making my heart sad. I remember like we were like a year and a half into it, and then I think you were just kind of getting tired of it, and kind of like started going out and eating fast food. And there's like, listen, I'm not like, I don't need it to be super rigid, but I could what I was confronting was this feeling like we weren't on the same page.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm like, I'm not trying to be your Nazi, your food Nazi, but there was like some sneaking around. There was, you didn't feel like you could trust me. You felt like maybe I was being like that. Maybe you didn't fully understand my heart. So there was like disconnect, and I was like, we need to like get on the same page here.
Mm.
I don't know if that's how
Yeah.
you experience it, but we kind of had this long conversation about.
I don't feel like I was sneaking around, but I like, yeah, I would. I don't know.
No, but do you
I
remember
would.
that there was a one time you went and you got like a, you told me about it like not even a day later, but
Yeah.
you were like, I need to tell you something. Like, I went to, what is it, like Poor Boy Subs?
But yeah, I eat food that
Yeah,
was like
like,
not on.
yeah.
Yeah, and I just wouldn't.
You would
Yeah.
tell me. You actually would tell
Yeah,
me,
I would. Yeah.
but you would like rat your own self out. But because we're not like
Yeah,
that,
I
we don't
hate
sneaky around
hiding
each other.
things.
But like, that was like, it was hidden for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I say, yeah, I know. I mean, like, yeah.
Well, I think ultimately, how do I say this? I think in a healthy marriage, there needs to be freedom for either partner to bring their dreams and desires and requests to the other partner.
Yeah.
So when you're like, "Hey, I want to create this generational health legacy for my children," like, where are you at with that? This is what I want to do. Where are you at? That I don't think there's anything wrong with that level of confrontation, but
Hmm.
I think that can, for a boy or someone that's still growing in manhood, that can be a really hard confrontation,
Yeah.
because the invitation there is to man up,
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
for better, like, whatever word you want to use, but the invitation there is to man up, because what a man does is he lays his life down for his family and for those that he loves, and he leads by serving, and he hears the heart and the requests of his wife, and he adjusts. And
Yeah.
so I think for me, part of my journey in all this has been growing from a boy to a man. There are still parts of me that are like a boy, that are still being developed into being more of a man. And that's hard to admit, but it's just true.
Hmm.
So I think what happens is, when adult men are met with things like that, they're still actually developmentally like a boy.
Yeah.
So they take it personal or offensive, or they don't want to give up their pleasures or the things they want for the other person.
Yeah.
I think that was part of my struggle, is letting go of what I want, letting go of my pleasures, the sacrifice of, that's all the things that boys like, is they find meaning in their pleasures
Yeah.
and things in their way. But as you grow into a real adult developmentally, the thing that you're really after aren't things, it's people,
Hmm.
it's
That's good.
relationship, it's your family. You live to actually lay, the meaning of your life becomes to lay your life down for those you love the most.
Yeah.
And they are the thing that you live for,
Hmm.
not just what can I get or how can I satisfy this need within myself. So I think that's is
Hmm.
still something I struggle with, and is still a part of my own healing journey as far as like spirit and soul, you know.
Hmm.
But that they're all intertwined, so they all affect one another.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think in a way, God has definitely used you to accelerate my healing process in some ways, or just invite me into healing, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
because I can't really hide in where I'm
Hmm.
at,
Yeah.
you know. So marriage can actually be this refinement tool of, especially the healthier both of you get, and you're willing to communicate and confront in healthy and kind ways, that actually it actually can become like consistent invitations to grow up,
Wow.
to actually like grow up in Christ, is what I would say, to grow up
Yeah.
into becoming like Jesus. But it also can just be growing up into being an adult,
Right.
which is an adult, a true adult. Like, it's not all about you anymore. When
Hmm.
you're a kid, it feels like the whole world revolves around you.
Right.
And it, but as you grow up and you become secure in who you are,
Yeah.
and your needs are getting met, and you've thought through all that, it shifts.
Yeah. That's really good.
That's hard.
It is. It's
I
challenging.
think a lot of, I think that actually is one of the biggest things that harm marriages,
Yeah.
is one or both people aren't willing to grow up, or they're not willing to bend, or they're not willing to yield.
It's a yielding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they get hard hearted,
Yeah.
and it's just easy to get hard hearted.
Talk about like the Bible talks about giving like a heart of flesh. Like
Just staying
this,
soft.
the flesh is this like it feels emotion. It feels the
Yeah.
heart is thought to be this like center of emotion. A heart of flesh would feel things deeply. It wouldn't be turned off towards things. It wouldn't be hard, be
Yeah.
bitter, be hard. I think of like bitterness or like resentment, like
Hmm.
blocking, love blocking, pushing people away, isolation.
A lot of us don't want to feel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's normal. And to some extent, it's valid. It's
Right.
hard to want to feel the pain of something,
Mm-hmm.
or to want to sit in your pain,
It's really
or
hard.
it's hard to stay soft hearted and tender
Right.
when a lot of us are going through life and hard things are happening, whether it's within your marriage or outside of your marriage, at your job, whatever, it is hard to stay soft. That's why you have to have a why, a pretty strong why.
Right.
Saying, I think a lot of times women are pegged by men as like naggy and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it'd be healthier for them to learn that maybe they're actually they're like, part of their role is to act as a mirror and invite you into growth. So a lot of times
That's good.
we perceive them as naggy, but we could actually learn to craft our relationship together where you could become one of my biggest invitations to growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, that's...
But you were saying that like one of the biggest struggles is like being perceived as this nagging wife.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the biggest struggles that you have in as far as navigating the healing journey in marriage.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's very tempting to, I mean, it can be tempting to control, but I think that is legitimately a struggle for women. But there is also then the perception of control when you're not actually operating in it, of this, yes, you don't want to be a nagging wife, the Bible talks about it, but the perception, sometimes I feel like, oh, this feels naggy, but that's because I have some internal stuff going on where I'm feeling insecure. Actually, it's, my heart is to edify. My heart is to support and
Totally.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's really good. The invitation to growth and healing is a big invitation, especially when you're talking about like food as medicine and stuff like that, because it's so life altering. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one. Peace out.